So I had to learn actually how to control my language, control my emotions, not be reactive, and more responsible to what was happening internally for that player versus what was happening for me. So it really was a co-regulation, honestly, just really like picking up on those subtle cues. It allowed me to be so sensitive to every little thing the golfer was doing that I could then pick up on that and read that and help like be a facilitator for what that golfer needed in that moment. So it came out of a lot of trial and error.
Well, this sounds really cool because I've never heard actually about this skill set and benefit that the caddy gives to the player, because some of the times we just see, the outside and surface level on TV of the clubs and the numbers and the wind and, more of the physical things.
Mhm.
But you're explaining some sort of energetic relationship that's really intimate between you and the player, and you being able to almost be like a concierge of his emotions and where he's at. And if he's maybe going high, we bring him down. If he's down, to bring him up. And if he's too serious, to lighten him up. And you're kind of like this energetic orchestrator
Yeah.
to help him, play the best golf he can. I think that's like really cool.
Yeah, it was cool. And that's exactly what it was. I was an orchestrator. I was like a conductor, like my player's like pissed off. I don't have many holes for him to mess up, especially if we're on the back nine. So essentially, I'd have a kind of like a little gamut of just trivia questions I could run through that would just pop him out of his own like stuff, and without me being like, hey, cheer up, like we'll get him, just he doesn't need a cheerleader all the time. Sometimes it's pull your head out of your ass, but most of the time it's like, you need to say something that isn't going to piss him off, especially if somebody's pissed.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Did the players at the time that you were doing this know that you were doing this?
No, this is kind of on such a deeper level that no, there's no way. I mean, I was prepared for everything. I had all this. I had pieces of paper, and each one, some were jokes, if I need to lighten the mood. Some were about current events, and then some were about like trivia questions. And based on like what that individual is like experiencing, I know where to navigate them, and I know their personality. So sometimes they're like not into sports. So we're not going to cover like, hey, did you see the Bills play, last night versus, hey, did you actually know that there's 3 oceans that touch 2 continents in the world? Do you have any idea which 2 continents they are? People are like, oh, or not continents, sorry, countries. And people are like, oh, I don't know. Like, let me try to figure that out. So that was something I used a lot of. And in fact, just a little segue, Tiger loved trivia, loved it. So I became really like sharp on my trivia questions because every time we played a practice round with Tiger, which was a lot because Bubba and him were friends, I was just hammering him with trivia, and he loved it. He ate that stuff up. An opportunity to get better, an opportunity to improve, whether that was his physical body, his mind, he would just jump all over that. So yeah, it was that was a cool little thing that I got to see that. So you learn the different personalities. Some they don't care about trivia. They just want to hear something else. Tell them jokes or whatever it is.
So it sounds like you need to know 2 things from what I'm hearing, which is, one, you need to know your player's game, like your actual golf game. And 2, it sounds like it really, really helps if you really know who your golfer is, his hobby, his interests, his personality, his tendencies, and to be able to work with both of those as the round goes on.
Yeah, and like almost therapeutic in a way, like a therapist. You're kind of maybe probing the right questions to allow them to find the right answers for themselves. Just it's probably one of the most dynamically like challenging jobs I've ever had because there is no one thing to be good at. It's not like, hey, listen, you're going to be a social media manager, post 3 times a day. This is the platform. There's no instructions. It's human connection. It's human interaction. And every time you get fired and get rehired by another player, it's a clean slate. It's a whole gamut of other insecurities or what have you, or personality traits, or even like quirkiness that you have to show up for and relate to.
He is insane. I see him. Right there he goes.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so it sounds like as you're working your way up this ladder, whether it's learning, different parts of the body for stretching or for working out, or the mental side and the golf game, you're building this really well-roundedness of skills between the internal and external. And I'm sure that's helping you from player to player. And so next up on the list, I think, is how did you get in contact with Bubba Watson, and how did that partnership become between you and him come together?
I actually think like Bubba like got me fired from a job first. What I mean by that is I was actually caddying for Ryan Moore on the tour, and every time we played a practice round, Bubba would just hammer Ryan for having a caddy slash like trainer. He's like, "Why you have a trainer? You're not fat. What do you need to do?" Like he just constantly on Ryan for like, "You don't need him. That shit doesn't work." It's just he was he just had a huge wall up against any kind of personal improvement, probably because he just was curious, and he probably knew he needed it for himself. So it was a constant, like, sometimes we badger the things that we know we need but aren't ready to like hear the message yet. So ultimately my relationship with Ryan didn't work out. Ryan actually started to play bad and probably was like, I think Bubba's right. But ironically enough, Bubba hired me after Ryan and I split. I actually thought it was a prank. When Bubba first called me, I'm like, yeah, right. Of any human being on the planet that would hire me, it would not be Bubba. That'd be the last choice. And because he didn't do anything, related to like fitness or conditioning or anything. He's just an incredible like freak athlete. And I was just shocked. I thought it was a prank. And ultimately, like, I found out like it wasn't a prank. I actually called a few people and was like, "Hey, is he really actually looking for someone?" Now, Bubba didn't ask me to be his caddy. Most of the times I was actually doing like this like personal performance and also caddying at the same time. So my days were very full, sun up to late into the night, because I was still doing massage therapy, stretching, training outside the ropes. I was caddying inside the ropes. Doing nutrition right before, some kind of like muscle activation prior to the round. My life was not my own by any means. It's zero sovereignty, but I poured everything I had into my players. And I think that's the real way to elicit change. If you want to make a change in something, it's going to have to be all in. There's no have 4 or 5 irons in the fire. You have to go all in on things. And so once I realized Bubba was serious about actually having a trainer, not a caddy, he just offered me the training position. And he basically said, "Hey, I'm going to hire you for 5 weeks. They're probably going to fire you, but it'll give you 5 more weeks to find another job on the tour." I'm like, nothing like pressure going into it. But I will tell you this. From my previous experience, I noticed when I started making a lot of physical changes with my players, working out, a little soreness kind of crept up. They played like dog shit for like the first like 6 weeks. And so knowing that and seeing that, I was like, "Hey, Bubba, you're going to play terrible for the first 6 weeks. Then you're going to play great." So I bought myself some time with that. And ultimately he ended up saying, after 5 weeks, "Hey, I think I got to let you go." And I actually stood up and said, "No, 1 more week. You only have 1 more week left in the regular season. Might as well just ride it through." And he agreed to that, and he came in like 5th. And that was the start of a 5-year relationship.
That's a hilarious story, first of all. 2, were you able to see Bubba's talent in those days when you first started to meet with him? Did you see the potential of where he was going, what he was destined to become?
Yeah, I think if there's anything, I have a good ability for like an eye. Someone's got a great eye for like brand curation, or they can see something. I'm really good at like seeing where someone actually can improve. It's not necessarily like doing anything different. It's just putting different things in different structural orders so they can excel at what they do. Bubba was wearing lots of hats. When you can kind of eliminate certain things and have them only focus on the thing that they're good at, their genius, you really start to see what can pour out of them. And I've been very fortunate to pick up on those small energy fluctuations that have determined like, hey, this person has incredible potential. I would love to like work with them to see where it can become. And I think a lot of my probably successes have come from that ability to pick up on that, support them, and push them towards the forefront of that and stay in the back and just watch them just kind of just blossom into the world.
I've known you for probably around 8 years now. And, one of the first things I realized about you is your self-sacrificing nature to serve somebody else. And, we know Mr. Woosley, Dave Woosley, and just from
Mhm.
knowing you and knowing him, it sounds like really working on the tour, working for players. It's a real self-sacrificing job, like a devotion to service, to doing everything in your power to help your player.
Yeah, I think that it's very fortunate, actually, Bubba having that tremendous amount of success in the time period that I was with him, going to world number two, winning like Masters championships. These things put me in this stratosphere of like wealth. I was around people who had amassed tremendous wealth. They're billionaires. They own incredible like properties around the world and jets, and it was really like daunting, but like also an awesome opportunity to see into the window of like, what does this look like? And what is the feeling around all this energy? And like, it just gave me this incredible insight about like, well, if I imagine myself having this type of wealth, what does that feel like? And what is the responsibility around that? I got to be with these people. I got to feel them. I got to be like right there with them. And that like really just that gave me exactly what I needed. I was like, ooh, I know that this isn't necessarily my favorite thing in the world. My favorite thing is actually service. My favorite thing is like showing up for others and like helping them. And just someone needs something, phenomenal. I'd love to kind of do anything I can, whether that's a connection or, I'm just always pouring abundance into others. That's just my currency. I call it touch points, but essentially, the quality of my life will be measured by how many people I'm able to interact with and how many people I'm able to like smile at and actually truly help. And that help comes from like a wealth of knowledge from travel. Maybe it's financial sometimes, maybe it's a wealth of advice. I think maybe it's just listening. I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that like even listening is one of the greatest gifts you can give to someone, to witness them and who they are. These are the kind of the currencies in which I measure my life. And I think it was really important for me to be in those energies, to see what I didn't want, to know exactly what I wanted, and to know how I wanted to spend the rest of my life.